So let's jump on in. Our first question comes from Mike. Mike asks, I've been having difficulty with managing my anxiety and comfortability when doing the breathe light to breathe right exercise. The slow inhale, and I'm assuming the CO2 retention, causes me to feel a little on edge. Is there anything I should do about this, or should I avoid doing this exercise until I have tried other avenues? This is a really great question, Patrick. Obviously, right down your alley here. So breathe light to breathe right. Maybe it'd be great to explain to the audience who may not be familiar with what that exercise is, and then answer Mike. Like for him, is this something that he should still be doing, though he feels a little bit on edge, a little anxiety? Is there other things he should do before it? What's your take on that?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's something that, I've had mistakes and made mistakes with it over the years. I remember when I came across Breathwork and Breathe Light, it was back in 1997, 1998. And the way that I was doing it, and basically Breathe Light is about breathing less air. That's simply what it is. Taking less air into your body in order to generate a feeling of air hunger. And the air hunger is telling you that carbon dioxide is increasing in the blood because carbon dioxide is the primary stimulus to breathe. But I remember when I was doing it, I used to tense up to do it. I didn't have instruction at the time. I had very, very basic, understanding of it. And I was tensing myself, and this is very common with people with perfectionist tendencies, putting in too much effort.
You're right. Yep.
I remember going to this doctor. His name is Dr. Jack Gibson. And he was a 92-year-old surgeon. And he had conducted 3,000 operations without anesthetic, using hypnosis. And he had spent many decades as well working with people with asthma. And at that time as well, I had a huge interest, as I still do, but definitely with asthma. He put me into relaxation. And it was the first time that I actually could experience what it felt like to be fully relaxed.
Yes.
And that was the way to do it. And I had made the mistake, putting in too much effort, too much focus. And I've seen it happen with people with perfectionist tendencies. And it's people with perfectionist tendencies who are more prone to chronic hyperventilation. These people are not the no-hopers. These people are driven. These are type A personalities, but they put in too much effort. And I suppose it's like that old adage, how can you try and relax? You can't. You can imagine a cat sitting up in the windowsill, and the cat is trying to relax. The cat doesn't have to try and relax. It's only the human being that's trying to relax.
Yes.
So we need that passive approach. So I suppose with breathing, if one is sitting down and you're practicing it and you're taking a really soft breath coming into your nose and a really relaxed and a slow and a gentle exhalation, and then a very, very soft breath coming into your nose and a really, really relaxed and a slow and gentle exhalation. There's two aspects to it. Number one is that the breath coming into your nose should be so soft, almost that you hardly feel any air coming into your nose. The second is that your exhalations should be so slow and relaxed and passive, just allowing the air to leave the body effortlessly. Now, it's a great way also to help stimulate the vagus nerve, because you've got your slow exhalation there, which is going to help stimulate the vagus nerve. But you also have the increase of carbon dioxide, which is a vagotropic effect.
Yes.
So it's kind of a weird exercise, because in one way it's generating air hunger, which can tip people into a fight or flight or some feeling of that suffocation. But on the other aspect, it's actually activating the body's relaxation response.
Exactly.
Now, I remember then that when I was working with people, especially people with any tendency towards anxiety, that normally if an individual practices it and they feel air hunger, they might find it's a little bit uncomfortable. But if a person has a little bit of anxiety or trauma, or if they had an air drowning experience in the past or prone to panic disorder, they can have a very strong reaction to the feeling of suffocation. So coming back to Mike's question, number one is, Mike may have a strong reaction to the feeling of suffocation, and the air hunger can generate a fear response as opposed to a relaxation response. So what I would say to him is, do reduced volume breathing, but one of the best ways to do it without having to do anything is actually just go for a walk with your mouth closed. Because it's natural during physical exercise that you feel air hunger. The body always feels air hunger when you do physical exercise.
Right.
if you're not feeling air hunger going for a walk, go for a light jog.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and breathing in and out through your nose is going to enable carbon dioxide to increase in the blood. So you still get the exposure to the air hunger and the increase of carbon dioxide. Another aspect for Mike is don't do the mistakes that I'd made. And that's deliberately interfering with your breathing muscles. In actual fact, just let everything go. And focus on just the inside of your nose. Almost ignore your body from the neck downwards. Pay no attention whatsoever to the chest and tummy. Pretend it doesn't even exist. And just bring your attention just inside the nostrils and take that very soft breath air coming into the nose and the really relaxed and a slow and a gentle exhalation.
Yes.
It's a fine line. It's almost that it's a balancing act because you want to gently soften your breathing to the point of air hunger, but you don't want to soften it too much that the brain reacts by sending an increased stimulus to breathe, because then you'll have involuntary contractions of the diaphragm.
Yeah.
And then you've gone a little bit too far. So your ability to do the breathe light exercise is going to be influenced by your Bolt score. And your Bolt score is the length of your comfortable breath hold time. If you have a Bolt score of, say, 5 or 6 or even 10 seconds, 11 seconds, 12 seconds, breathe light can be difficult because you already feel air hunger. You know, it's like one of these things. Somebody will say to me, you want me to breathe less air? You want me to feel air hunger? And I say, yeah, that's kind of the objective of this exercise.
Right.
But they'll tell me, my problem is that I'm feeling air hunger all the time. And the reason that they are feeling air hunger all the time is when their Bolt score is too low.
Yes.
So what we want to do is we want to have them actually breathe less air to reduce the chemosensitivity of the body to carbon dioxide, to improve CO2 tolerance. By virtue of that, then, the Bolt score is going to increase because one of the factors that influence the length of your breath hold time is your ability to tolerate CO2, carbon dioxide. And when the Bolt score improves, you've got much more control over your breathing.
Yep.
So what would I say to Mike? If his Bolt score is less than 12 or 13 seconds, I would say don't worry about doing the breathe light exercise for the moment. Only focus on the small breath holds. Take a normal breath in through your nose and out through your nose and pinch your nose and hold your breath for between 3 and 5 seconds. Then breathe normally for about 10 seconds. And again, take a normal breath in and out through your nose, pinch your nose and hold for 3 to 5 seconds, and then breathe normally for 10 seconds. Yep. And you will be surprised the people that we've used this simple exercise with. Like, I don't know if I mentioned it in the podcast, but one of our instructors, he had a beautiful 22-year-old daughter, and she died by suicide. And I could only think there must be nothing which is horrific for any parent to have to go through.
Can't even imagine.
And a lovely kid, lovely family, and just that's the way it is, you know. And he will say to me that the one exercise that helped him the most during this time was small breath holds.
Right. Yes.
And then if we look at the article by Dr. Singh, he talks about holding of the breath and an exhalation as a means of stimulating the vagus nerve. And that might be what's actually happening, that instead of having a slow and relaxed and prolonged exhalation to help stimulate the vagus nerve, we are taking a normal breath in and out through the nose and pinching the nose to hold the nose, which by virtue of the exhale and breath hold after the exhalation, it's similar to having a prolonged exhalation.
Yeah.
So it could be having a similar effect. So Mike, there's your not a simple answer as seeing. And it's just that feeling of relaxation and not interfering with your breathing muscles too much. And at the point that you start noticing that you have involuntary contractions of the diaphragm, take a rest. Or if you're stressed, take a rest. Because this exercise with doing the breathe light is not an exercise to stress the body and mind.
Right.
It's an exercise to dampen the stress response and activate the body's relaxation response. And you'll know anyway by how you feel. And you will also know by the increased watery saliva in the mouth. Your hands should be getting warmer and your mouth should be more watery. And of course, increased watery saliva in the mouth, your body is telling you that the body is ready for the digestion of food.
Right. Yep, exactly. That's your parasympathetic nervous system kicking in, the rest and digest aspect of your autonomic nervous system, and which is really mediated by the vagus nerve, which is you mentioned, our 10th cranial nerve. One thing that's super interesting that resonated with me, Patrick, was this idea of perfectionism and trying really hard. And a lot of us that are really interested in health and wellness and very passionate about it tend to fall in that camp. And one thing that I've seen so often as a clinician when engaging in heart rate variability biofeedback, or just biofeedback in general, is that people utilize way too much volition. They're trying way too hard, like you mentioned. And what we use a term in biofeedback called passive volition, which means that you know that you're engaging in the behavior through volition, but you're doing it passively. And I found this to be true with me. So when I first started getting into this, I am an absolute perfectionist when it comes to these things, is that I found that, I was being taught kind of the old adage of like, all right, go ahead and place the hand on the belly. And when you inhale, I want that belly to go outward. And I was pushing. I was like, I'm going to try to push it as hard as I can. I was hooked up, to an EKG, watching heart rate variability. My heart rate shot up. My HRV plummeted. I was like, I don't feel good at all. Like, this sucks. Like, I actually remembered initially thinking, I don't think I'm going to do this for a living. Like, I was getting trained in HRV biofeedback, and I was like, I don't really like this. And then, and I was asking the person who was my clinician, I was like, well, what's going on here? Like, you're telling me to breathe slow. I'm breathing slow. Like, I'm breathing at, 5.5 breaths per minute right now. I'm engaging in all of the mechanics, but the problem was they weren't appropriate mechanics. And I basically was like, I'm trying really hard at this. And they're like, you're trying really hard at this. And that's the problem. You need to be passive with this. So the funniest thing, the most informative piece of data that I ever got from my first level of training, Patrick, was when they hooked EMG, looking at muscular tension, on my traps during breathing exercises, and they also put it on my back, on my lats. And what I found was that when I was engaging in my volition type breathing, which was causing crazy increases in heart rate, decreases in HRV, I was holding so much tension in my shoulders and in my traps and in my back that you could just look at it as blatant as it could be. Like, I would be fairly relaxed when we weren't engaging in the exercise, but then when I engaged in the exercise, muscular tension just shot up. Like, it was awful. And then finally they said, all right, now what I want you to do is allow your body just to rest and just focus on breathing through your nose. And when that happened, and I didn't focus as much on like trying to pooch out my belly or like have that real strong lateral expansion of the ribs, everything changed for me. And I was like, this is what it's supposed to feel like. I didn't feel as stressed, as anxious, and it worked for me. I felt a lot less stressed. I felt like I was activating my parasympathetic nervous system. And what happened? Heart rate goes down. HRV skyrocketed up, and then subjectively, I felt really good. And so I don't know, again, Mike may not experience anything like that, but I guarantee that other people who are listening to this have experienced some level of that. And again, maybe that is one of Mike's difficulties, but I like how you kind of said too, like, we just need to progressively move towards there, but focus and move towards the breathe light to breathe right exercises. But I also think too, like, just focusing again on our level of interoception and the awareness of like, what is the body doing right now? Like, are you just like throwing, like, are you like clenching your body as if you were squatting 500 pounds like, or are you allowing yourself to kind of rest and relax and sink into the chair or wherever you're in? It's just something to focus on. So I like that. Good response there.
Yeah, and there's even more out of that, because now if, like, for example, if somebody comes in with panic disorder, I'm never sure which camp will they fall into. Can this individual, will they tolerate the air hunger or will they not? So normally what I do now just across the board is I actually have them do 30 seconds of air hunger.
Yes.
And then a minute's rest, because I think it's very important that they realize at the end of the 30 seconds, I'm going to say stop. So they know that the end is near.
Yep.
So even if it is a bit uncomfortable, the fact that they know it's only for a very short time. And the other thing is, I think it's really important to expose people to this air hunger. It is a slight feeling of suffocation. Yeah. It's not the most pleasant. It's not bad, though, at the same time.
Right.
But it's almost that you're training your brain to embrace discomfort, that you're not reacting to it. Yes. And I think it is that feeling and that fear of suffocation which can often feed into it. But Jay, your comments have raised another huge question, and that is all of the people who are wearing wearables.
Mm-hmm.
That they now know that something is tracking their data.
Right.
And it could put on a stress on them that what will do is that the measuring of their data could hamper the very thing that they are trying to improve.
Yes.
But other aspects, say for example, if you had an athlete and the coach has access to this data,
Mm-hmm.
now the athlete has an added psychological stress.
Right.
Because they feel that the coach is going to make decisions based on the data that the coach is recognizing. Like, it's kind of a bit of a minefield, isn't it?
It is. It's really interesting because when they've actually researched kind of what happens when they put wearables on people, what we know is that for certain personality types, they thrive under themselves looking at their data and having others look at their data. For others, it can be very detrimental. So people who are really high in neuroticism and are like these perfectionists, it tends to be to the detriment of them if they're not utilizing it appropriately or being coached appropriately with it. And then for other people, it's like they see it as a challenge, as in like, well, now like I am going to thrive because I have the data to inform me. So they basically have a full closed loop system. One thing we know in scientific literature is that there is an effect in research called the Hawthorne effect. And the Hawthorne effect means that we will actually change our behavior, how we're acting or interacting kind of with ourselves or with others when we are being observed.
Well, is this the experiment that they did in the factory and they started changing light bulbs, or am I totally off key on that one? It is.
It is. So, and it's the idea too that if we know that somebody, like say with a lab coat or behind a wall, is watching us, or if, this little guy on our wrist or this little guy around our chest or, whatever is watching us, then we're going to change our behavior because of that. And it could be for the better or it could be for the worse. Yeah. So it's a very interesting thing. And I'm sure that as we go progress in kind of our understanding of how people interact with wearables, we're going to find out a lot that we're doing right and a lot that we're doing wrong. I'm sure there's a lot that we're doing wrong. And, the one big thing that I see in the wearable space is this idea of like fulfilling or like having a self-fulfilling prophecy based on data. Well, my Oura Ring said that I slept like crap, so therefore like the rest of my day is going to be like crap. Or it's like, oh man, my HRV is bad, so like now I have an excuse not to train. Like, it's those things that I'm like, we got to watch out because, we want our data to inform us. But also, too, and this goes back to something that I beat this drum on so often, is that we have to check in subjectively, like with our experience, with our feel. And if we find that too much data like is causing like, paralysis by analysis, take that thing off, throw it in the corner and come back to it later. You don't need it. That's the thing. It's like, this is not a need. This is something that can be quite helpful, but if it's to your detriment, then, what good is it? Like, throw it to the side, come back to it later, work on just your own subjective feel. Like, that should be number one always. Again, that's my opinion. And I'm someone who, again, like, I'm kind of like the fox.
You're like that. I think it's great to hear it coming from you, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
It's great because it's down to earth in some ways,
Sure. Yeah. Well, I tell people too, it's like, I am a scientist. I'm a data nerd. Like, I love this stuff, but I also realize that it can be detrimental if people don't know kind of how to use that power, like if like the power's handed to you, but like, if you don't use it correctly, then, it can really be to your downfall. And so for me, it's always like subjective first, objective second. How do they marry? How do they not? And then go from there. And most people don't take the opportunity to do that. It's one of the biggest problems I have in the biohacking space is that people are like, it's objective data, and that is like whatever is stated in my objective data goes. Like, I don't need to check in subjectively because my data can't fool me. And it's like, well, yeah, your data is your data in one sense, but then in another sense, like, you have to know how to use it and harness it. And if you don't use it and harness it well, then you're not going to perform nearly as good as what you think you're going to be able to perform. It can be, again, to your downfall. So I could get on like the largest tangent on this, and I know people have heard me beat this drum for a while, but again, like I like to say, I'm a data guy, probably as big as just about anybody in this space, but I realize too that if we place way too much emphasis on that, then we're going to leave kind of our interoception, our subjective experience behind, and that's a bad thing.
But in terms of awareness, like I can see the benefits now because, say, for example, you look at your data. If you are feeling crap, and your data is telling you that your HRV is significantly reduced, and then when you're feeling better and you see the change in your HRV, you'll get an idea over a period of time that all you have to do is tune in yourself, and you'll actually have a good idea where your HRV is without even having to look at the data.
Exactly.
So there's a great kind of tool there as well, long term.
Yes. For me, I tell people I want you to utilize and leverage technology so that you can become your own biofeedback device. Because for me, it's like, I can't say, I won't be like use enough, hubris to say that I can know exactly where my HRV is at any given moment, but I'm pretty good at estimating it. Like I can tune in and feel, I can, I think I mentioned this on the last podcast. I can feel, I'm in tune with my heart rate a lot. Like I feel my heart rate. And I can know kind of based on the cadence of my heart rate, which sounds woo-woo berserk, but again, I've done this for so long and I've been really into this world that I can notice the cadence of my heart rate and kind of feel my heart rate increasing or decreasing across the respiratory cycle enough to kind of average out my HRV pretty closely. And I still use it and collect data all the time, obviously. I own a health technology company with Hanu. However, I also realize too that for me, like the subjective check-in to where I'm at always provides me with more data or information than me kind of double checking with biometrics. The biometrics are helpful. It can be really great to help better train interoception or self-awareness, but shouldn't be the thing that we rely on because we become way too reliant on other technology. And the last thing we want to be relying on is kind of things that inform our health and well-being. I think that's a scary place to be.
That's great.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Mike, again, thanks for the question. That was great. Reach out to us if we answered your question on here, if you remember asking us.